You've finally done it, haven't you, Lydia? You finally finished what the rain started 12 years ago? Sterling's voice roared through the phone, vibrating with a coward's rage. I didn't flinch. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, my fingers gripping the emerald pendant so hard the gold edges bit into my skin. Don't you dare raise your voice at me, Sterling. You sent this box. You wrote the card. And now you're calling me a murderer because I had the audacity to wear your anniversary gift. I didn't send a green stone. I'm not a fool, he hissed, his breath ragged. If Cassidy saw that, if she saw that specific shade of emerald. She's seizing on the floor, Sterling. Your mother just slapped me across the face and called me a filthy intruder. Is that part of the anniversary surprise too? I barked back, my voice dripping with acid. What is this? What is this damn color to you people? Take it off! He whimpered, his tone shifting from rage to a pathetic plea. Lydia, for the love of God, take it off and hide it before you destroy us all. Too late, I said, my teeth clenched. The mask just slipped, Sterling, and I'm not putting it back on. I slammed the phone down on the marble vanity. The silence that followed was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and betrayal. Downstairs, the house felt like a crime scene. I marched down the grand staircase, not like a grieving relative, but like a woman going to war. I found Beatrice kneeling over Cassidy's limp body on the Persian rug. The paramedics hadn't arrived yet. Beatrice looked up, her face a mask of aristocratic fury. You're still wearing it, she breathed, her voice trembling. You spiteful, arrogant girl. I told you to stay in the shadows where you belong. You've poisoned her. Poisoned her. I laughed, a sharp, cold sound that echoed in the foyer. I put on a necklace, Beatrice, a piece of jewelry. If your family is so fragile that a gemstone causes a neurological collapse, then you're not elite. You're pathetic. You know nothing. Beatrice stood up, her eyes blazing. This family gave you everything. We plucked you from your middle-class life and gave you the Sterling name. And this is how you repay us? By triggering the one thing that could ruin him. I stepped into her personal space, looming over her. I was taller, younger, and fueled by a decade of suppressed resentment. You didn't give me anything, Beatrice. You bought a silent companion for your son. But you forgot one thing: I'm not for sale anymore. Why did Cassidy scream about the girl in the rain when she saw this? Why did Sterling sound like he was seeing a ghost? Beatrice's face went pale, her composure finally cracking. Get out. Get out of this house before I have the security detail drag you to the gates. Oh, I'm going, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I reached behind my neck, ripped the emerald necklace off the chain, snapping with a satisfying pop, and tossed it at her feet. But I'm not going quietly. And I'm taking more than my clothes with me. I'm taking the truth. You'll have nothing, Beatrice shouted as I turned my back on her. No money, no name, no future. I stopped at the front door, looking back at the woman who had spent 3 years trying to hollow me out. I've spent 3 years living in a house of gray and beige to keep your secrets. Today, I'm finally seeing in color. And Beatrice, that emerald looks a lot like a crime scene. I walked out into the humid Chicago heat, the iron gates clanging shut behind me. My heart was a drum. My skin was on fire with adrenaline. I had no suitcase, no plan, and a bank account they would probably freeze in an hour. But as I looked at the red marks on my neck where the chain had snapped, I didn't feel pain. I felt a beautiful, burning rage. Sterling thought he could use me as a shield. Beatrice thought she could treat me like a servant. They thought Cassidy's condition would keep me silent forever. They were wrong. I was Lydia Vance, and I was about to burn their glass empire to the ground. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just turned the city into a blurred reflection of its own filth. I sat in a dimly lit 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the lake, the smell of burnt coffee a sharp contrast to the Chanel number. 5 World, I had just fled. My phone buzzed. Sterling. Then a text from Beatrice Lydia. Don't be a fool. Come home. We can fix this quietly. Quietly? I muttered, a bitter smirk tugging at my lips. That's your favorite word, isn't it? I ignored them. I had exactly $4,200 in a private account my mother had left me, money the Vances didn't know existed. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a war chest. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I wasn't looking for jewelry catalogs. I was looking for a ghost. Green light. Rain. 12 years ago. I spent 4 hours digging through digital archives of the Chicago Tribune. Nothing. Then I expanded the search to the surrounding suburbs. My eyes were burning when I finally saw it. Headline: Hit-and-run tragedy in Oak Brook, teen girl left for dead in the rain. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs. The date: June 14th, 12 years ago. The victim: Naomi Cross, 17. The description of the scene made my blood turn to ice. Witnesses reported seeing a dark luxury vehicle speeding away. A distinctive green light was seen reflecting in the puddles, possibly from a customized dashboard or a passenger's accessory. Lydia. I jumped, nearly knocking my coffee over. A man was standing over my booth. He looked like he hadn't slept since the decade began, deep bags under his eyes, a weathered trench coat, and a gaze that saw right through my expensive blouse. "You're the Vance girl," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" I snapped my hand instinctively, reaching for the heavy ceramic mug. If he was one of Sterling's fixers, I was going to give him a permanent souvenir. "The man who's been waiting 12 years for someone to walk out of that gate with a look of murder in their eyes," he said, sliding into the booth opposite me without an invitation. "I'm Arthur Cross. Naomi was my daughter." I froze. The rage that had been sustaining me suddenly felt hollow, replaced by a cold, crushing weight. You think Sterling did it?" Arthur leaned forward, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "I don't think." "I know, but the Vances own the precinct. They own the witnesses. They even own the car it was reported stolen 3 hours after my girl's heart stopped beating. And Cassidy." I asked, my mind racing back to her seizure. "She was there, wasn't she? She was only 11. She was in the passenger seat." Arthur hissed, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She saw it all. And that's why they've kept her drugged and locked in a room of gray shadows for a decade. They aren't protecting her from a condition, Lydia. They're protecting themselves from her memory." My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Lydia, thank God," Sterling's voice came through, sounding relieved, almost oily. "Mother told me you had a breakdown. Just tell me where you are." "I've sent a car. We'll get you some help, some rest." I looked at Arthur. He nodded slowly. "I'm at the diner on 4th Sterling." I said, my voice steady, my face a mask of cold fury. "But don't bother with the help. I'm coming back on my own terms." "Lydia, don't be difficult." "Difficult?" I interrupted, a sharp laugh escaping me. "Sterling, you haven't seen difficult yet. I'm coming home to pack my things. And by things, I mean every single lie you've ever told me." I hung up and looked at Arthur. "I need proof. Not just a grieving father's word. I need something that will hold up when I tear their house down." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a grainy, laminated photo. It was Naomi wearing a simple green scarf the exact shade of the emerald necklace. The police lost the physical evidence. But Cassidy, she's the evidence. If you can get her to talk, truly talk, they're finished. I'll get her to talk, I promised, standing up. The fear was gone. In its place was a predatory clarity. They treated me like a decorative bird in a cage. They forgot that even caged birds have claws. Be careful, Lydia Arthur warned. They've killed to keep this quiet. They won't hesitate to do it again. Let them try, I said, throwing a $20 bill on the table. I've lived in a house of ghosts for 3 years. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. I walked out of the diner and into the waiting black sedan Sterling had sent. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his expression blank. Back to the penthouse, ma'am. No, I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. Take me to the estate. I have a family meeting to attend. The black sedan glided through the iron gates like a shark entering familiar waters. I didn't wait for the driver. I slammed the door myself, the sound echoing like a gunshot against the mansion's marble facade. Beatrice stood in the foyer, flanked by 2 of Sterling's private security men thugs in tailored suits. Her face was a mask of restored aristocratic composure. You've caused quite a scene, Lydia, she said, her voice dropping into that chilling, silky tone. I trust your little tantrum helped you regain your senses. My senses have never been sharper, Beatrice, I retorted, marching past her. I didn't head for my bedroom. I headed for the West Wing toward Cassidy. Where do you think you're going? Beatrice snapped, signaling the men. They moved to block the hallway. I turned on my heel, my eyes flashing with a fire that made the guards hesitate. I am the mistress of this house by law. If you want to stop me, you'll have to do it physically. I'd love for the neighbors to see the Vances assaulting me on the front lawn. Imagine the headlines, Vance family thugs attack innocent wife. Let her through, a voice commanded from the top of the stairs. Sterling stood there, his tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand. He walked down slowly, his gaze fixed on me. Lydia, honey, let's go to the study. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults! I laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Adults don't drug their sisters to bury hit-and-run, Sterling. Adults don't buy silence with emeralds. The air in the room froze. Sterling's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. I met Arthur Cross, I said, stepping into Sterling's personal space. I could smell the fear beneath his expensive cologne. I saw the photo of Naomi. I know why Cassidy screams when she sees green. Arthur Cross is a delusional alcoholic, Beatrice hissed. He's been trying to extort us for a decade. Is he? Then why is Cassidy kept in a room without color? Why is she on a cocktail of sedatives? I turned my gaze back to Sterling. You were driving, weren't you? You were the golden boy, and you couldn't let a mistake, like a dead girl, ruin your empire. Sterling's face contorted. The visionary mask slipped, revealing the panicked boy who had fled into the night 12 years ago. It was an accident, Lydia. It was raining. She came out of nowhere. And you left her there. I screamed, shoving him with enough force to make him stumble. You left a 17-year-old to die in the mud, and then you imprisoned your own sister in a mental fog because she was the only witness. We saved this family, Beatrice yelled, her voice cracking. You didn't save anything, I said, my voice trembling with disgust. You just built a more expensive cage. Suddenly, a high-pitched wail echoed from the hallway. We all turned. Cassidy was standing there, clutching the emerald necklace I had discarded earlier. Her eyes, usually glassy, were sharp with a terrifying clarity. The green light, Cassidy whispered. Sterling, you didn't stop. I told you to stop, but you just kept driving. Cassidy, go back to bed, Sterling ordered, his voice shaking. No, I said, moving to Cassidy's side and taking her ice-cold hand. She's not going back to sleep, Sterling. Not tonight. Not ever again. I pulled out my phone, the screen glowing. I've been recording this entire conversation, and I just hit send to Arthur Cross's legal team. The room fell into a deathly silence. Sterling looked like he was going to vomit. Now I said, my voice cold as iron. Who wants to be the first to tell the police the truth? Sterling lunged for the phone, his face a distorted mask of desperation. I stepped back, my heels clicking sharply on the marble, and shoved the device deep into my blazer pocket. Don't even think about it, I hissed. The file is already in the cloud. You kill me, you touch me, and it goes public instantly. Your visionary career ends in a prison cell by morning. Lydia, listen to reason. Beatrice interjected, her voice tight and trembling. She moved toward the guards, signaling them to stand down. We can settle this. You want money. A divorce settlement. Name your price. 5 million. 10, just give us the phone. I looked at the woman who had spent 3 years treating me like a stray dog she had rescued. You think I want your blood money, Beatrice? I spent 3 years watching you slowly kill your own daughter's soul with pills and lies. You think a check is going to fix the hole you dug for Naomi Cross? It was a tragedy, yes. Sterling shouted, his eyes wild. He began pacing the foyer like a caged animal. But what good does it do to ruin more lives? Naomi is gone. If this comes out, Cassidy goes to a state institution, my company collapses, and thousands of employees lose their jobs. Do you want that on your conscience? Your conscience. I laughed, a jagged, angry sound. You don't get to lecture me on conscience while your sister is standing right there shaking like a leaf because of what you did. I turned to Cassidy. She was staring at Sterling with a look of profound, heartbreaking recognition. You told me I hit my head, Sterling. You told me the blood on my dress was mine. It was for your own good, Cass, Sterling pleaded, reaching out a hand he didn't dare use to touch her. You were a child. You couldn't handle the truth. You didn't protect her, Sterling. I snapped, stepping between them. You used her. You turned her mind into a prison so you could keep your penthouse views. You're not a brother. You're a jailer. Beatrice stepped closer, her eyes narrowed, trying a different tactic. And what about you, Lydia? You've enjoyed the private jets, the galas, the jewels. You're an accomplice now. You lived off the profits of that empire for 3 years. You think the world will see you as a hero. They'll see you as a gold digger who waited until the check cleared to grow a heart. The words stung, but I didn't let them show. I leaned in until I was inches from her face. Then let them. I'd rather be a gold digger in a witness box than a Vance in a palace of lies. At least I'll sleep tonight. Can you say the same? Beatrice? Or do you still see the green light every time you close your eyes? Get out. Beatrice whispered, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. Get out of my house. With pleasure, I said. I grabbed Cassidy's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. But I'm not leaving alone. Cassidy is coming with me. The hell she is, Sterling roared. She's a legal ward of this estate. You take her, and it's kidnapping. Then call the police, Sterling, I challenged, holding my phone up. Call them right now. I'm sure they'd love to hear why you're so desperate to keep her here. I'm sure the forensic team would love to take another look at the stolen car records from 12 years ago. Sterling froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was a man who had bought his way out of every problem in his life, and he had finally met someone who wasn't for sale. Come on, Cassidy, I said softly. Let's go find the sun. We walked toward the door. As we passed Sterling, he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, bruising. "You're making a mistake, Lydia. You have no idea how deep this goes. You're not just fighting a family. You're fighting the people who keep us in power." I wrenched my arm away, looking at him with pure loathing. "Then they'd better bring a bigger gun, Sterling, because I'm just getting started." We stepped out into the night. For the first time in 3 years, the air didn't taste like ash. It tasted like war. The tires of my old SUV, the only thing I truly owned, screeched as we tore away from the Vance estate. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat, clutching the emerald necklace as if it were a talisman. She stared at the passing streetlights with wide, haunted eyes, like a captive seeing the sun for the first time in a decade. "Are they following us?" she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. I checked the rearview mirror. 2 sets of headlights trailed us at a distance. If they are, they're about to learn I don't drive like a trophy wife when I'm pissed off, Cass. "Hold on." I veered into a crowded district, weaving through the late-night Chicago traffic with reckless precision until the headlights vanished. I pulled into a dilapidated motel on the city's outskirts, a place where the smell of stale cigarettes and cheap disinfectant acted as a natural shield against the elite. Inside the cramped room, a flickering neon sign outside cast a rhythmic red glow over Cassidy's pale face. "Why are we here, Lydia?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the floral-patterned bed. "Mother says the outside is dangerous. She says the colors, they make my brain break." I knelt in front of her, gripping her hands. "The colors don't break you, Cassidy. The lies do. They've been drugging you for 12 years to keep you from remembering that night in the rain. You aren't sick. You're a witness." A sharp knock at the door made us both jump. I grabbed a heavy glass lamp from the nightstand, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It's me," Cross, a muffled voice called. I opened the door. Arthur Cross stepped in, his gaze immediately locking onto Cassidy. The air in the room became heavy with grief. "You have her eyes," Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. Naomi had that same look when she was determined. "You're the man from the funeral," Cassidy said, her voice gaining a sudden eerie stability. "I saw you through the car window. You were crying in the mud while Sterling screamed at me to be quiet." Arthur let out a ragged sob, sinking into a plastic chair. "I've spent 12 years being called a lunatic. They told me my daughter was killed by a phantom." "I have the recording, Arthur," I said, pulling out my phone. Sterling admitted everything. The accident, the cover-up, the drugs. "It's not enough," Arthur said, wiping his eyes. "The Vances own the district attorney. They'll claim you coerced a mentally unstable girl. We need physical proof. We need the car." "The car was buried," Cassidy interrupted, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. "It smelled like wet cement. There was a giant gold V on a crane. Sterling and a man in a gray suit pushed it into a dark hole. The Aurora construction site," I whispered, a predatory clarity settling over me. "The Vance Plaza Foundation. That's where the evidence is." Suddenly, the motel window shattered. A brick wrapped in parchment thudded onto the carpet, spraying glass across the bed. I shoved Cassidy to the floor, my pulse racing. I snatched the paper and smoothed it out. In Beatrice's elegant, cold handwriting, it read, "Property must be returned to its rightful owners." "This is the last warning, Lydia." I looked at the jagged hole in the window, then at the terrified girl trembling on the floor. The rage I felt wasn't a flicker anymore. It was a white-hot inferno. "They want their property back," I growled, looking at Arthur. "Tell your lawyer to get ready, because I'm about to turn their property into a graveyard the whole world can see." "We can't stay here," Arthur hissed, peering through the shattered window into the darkness. "If they found us this quickly, they've got a tracker on your car, or they're buying the local cell towers." I didn't panic. I felt a strange, icy calm. I looked at the brick on the floor, then at Cassidy, who was hyperventilating. I grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Cassidy, listen to me. They call you property because they're afraid of you. You are the only thing in this world that can destroy Sterling Vance. Do you want to go back to the gray room? Do you want the blue candy? No. She gasped, her eyes clearing. Never again. Then we fight, I said. I turned to Arthur. Take her to your sister's place in Indiana. No phones, no credit cards. I'll keep the SUV and lead them on a chase toward the lake. What about you? Arthur asked, grabbing his jacket. I'm going to pay a visit to the man in the gray suit, I said, a dark smile spreading across my face. Henderson. He's the one who handled the stolen car report. He's the architect of this lie, and architects always keep blueprints. An hour later, I was standing outside a luxury high-rise in the Gold Coast. Henderson's penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel. I didn't try to sneak in. I walked straight to the intercom and pressed the button for 42B. Who is it? A voice crackled. The woman who's about to disbar you, Marcus, I said. Open the door or I start screaming Vance Plaza into every news camera in Chicago. I know about the car under the concrete. The buzz was instantaneous. When I stepped into his office, Henderson looked like he had seen a ghost. He was in a silk robe, clutching a glass of expensive bourbon. Lydia, you're playing a very dangerous game. The Vances aren't just a family, they're an institution. Institutions crumble, Marcus, especially when they're built on top of a dead girl, I said, walking to his desk and sitting in his leather chair. I put my muddy boots up on the mahogany surface. I want the original records, the real ones, the ones that show the VIN of the car Sterling lost 12 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Don't lie to me, I roared, slamming my hand on the desk. The sound made him jump. I spent 3 years being the perfect wife. I've listened to Sterling brag about how you cleaned up his messes. I have a recording of him admitting to the hit and run. If I go down, I'm taking you with me. Accomplice to vehicular manslaughter, tampering with evidence, kidnapping. How many years is that, Marcus? You're 60. You'll die in a cell. Henderson's hand shook so much he had to set his glass down. Sterling was just a kid. It was Beatrice. She was the one who insisted on the burial. I don't care who signed the check. I want the proof. He hesitated, then walked to a hidden safe behind a painting. He pulled out a thin, weathered folder. This is the disposal log for the Aurora site, page 4. The vehicle was listed as industrial waste and poured over at 3:00 a.m. I snatched the folder, scanning the pages. My heart soared. It was all there. The VIN matched Sterling's old sports car perfectly. Suddenly, the door to the penthouse burst open. Sterling stepped in, flanked by the guards from the estate. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore. He was in a black tactical jacket, his eyes bloodshot and wide with a manic energy. Lydia, give me the folder, Sterling said, his voice eerily quiet. You're too late, Sterling, I said, holding the folder to my chest. The truth is out. No, it isn't, he whispered, stepping closer. He pulled a small silver object from his pocket, not a gun, but a syringe. You're having a mental break, remember? The grief of Cassidy's deterioration has pushed you over the edge. You need to be sedated, for your own good. You wouldn't dare, I said, my back hitting the window. I've spent 12 years keeping this family together, Sterling said, his face inches from mine. You think I'll let a woman I bought at a charity gala ruin me? You're just another piece of waste, Lydia. And tonight, I'm pouring the concrete. He lunged. I grabbed a heavy crystal award from Henderson's desk and swung it with every ounce of my rage. The heavy crystal award connected with Sterling's temple with a sickening thud. He staggered back, the syringe slipping from his fingers, and shattering on the hardwood floor. The clear sedative, the very weapon used to cage my mind, spread across the floor like a broken promise. "You bitch!" he roared, clutching his head as blood began to leak through his fingers, staining his pristine white shirt. "I'm not your wife anymore, Sterling. I'm your reckoning," I screamed. I didn't wait for his hired thugs to close in. I dove across the mahogany desk, snatched the disposal logs, and bolted for the balcony. "Get her!" Henderson yelled, but his voice was thin and brittle with terror. I burst through the glass doors. 42 stories up, the wind ripped at my hair and the freezing rain bit at my skin. The Chicago skyline looked like a sea of diamonds, but I wasn't looking for an exit, I was looking for an audience. I climbed onto the stone railing, clutching the folder to my chest. "Stay back! Hundreds of thousands of people are watching you right now. If I fall, they see you push me. If I jump, they know exactly why." I held the folder up to the lens, flipping through the logs. "It's all here. Aurora construction site. June 14th. Your car wasn't stolen, Sterling. You poured concrete over it to hide a body." The comments flooded the screen in a frantic blur. The invisible walls of the Vance empire were melting under the heat of a smartphone camera. Sterling froze, realizing for the first time that his billions couldn't buy his way out of a live stream. "Lydia, please," he whispered, dropping to his knees. "We can settle this. We can build a foundation in her name. Anything you want." "You already built her a monument, Sterling?" I spat. "You built a shopping mall over her grave. You don't get to buy your way out of this one." Sirens wailed in the distance, a symphony of justice finally coming for him. I stepped down from the railing, walked right up to Sterling, and looked him in the eye. "The gray room is empty now, Sterling. And that green light you're so fond of, it just turned red." Beatrice appeared in the doorway, her face like a mask of cold stone. She didn't look at me. She looked at her broken son. "You fool," she whispered. "You let a girl destroy us." "No, Beatrice," I said, pointing the camera at her. "Your own lies did that. I'm just the one who finally turned on the lights." The sirens were screaming now, a wall of sound closing in on the penthouse. Beatrice didn't flinch. She stood in the doorway, her eyes like cold chips of flint staring at the phone in my hand, as if she could make it ignite with her mind. "You think a live stream is a conviction?" Lydia Beatrice said, her voice regaining that terrifying steady rhythm. "The police are coming, because I called them. I reported a home invasion and a mentally unstable daughter-in-law threatening a murder-suicide." "Nice try, Beatrice," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I didn't lower the phone. But thousands of people just saw Sterling begging for his life on the floor. They saw the blood on his head. They saw the fear. "You're not the one in control anymore." I turned the camera back to Sterling. He was still on his knees, staring at the shattered syringe. He looked broken, a hollow shell of the man I had married. "Sterling, tell them," I prompted, my voice a low, dangerous snarl. "Tell them how your mother made you do it. Tell them how she planned the burial. Maybe they'll give you a shorter sentence if you give them the real monster." "Don't you dare!" Sterling Beatrice hissed, taking a step forward. "Shut up, Mother!" Sterling suddenly screamed, the sound tearing from his throat like a wounded animal. He looked up at her, and for the first time I saw pure, unadulterated hatred in his eyes. "It's over. Look at her. She's not afraid of you. Why was I always so afraid of you? Because I kept you out of a cage." Beatrice roared back. "No, you kept me in your cage." Sterling stood up, swaying on his feet. He looked at the camera, then directly at me. "She's right, Lydia." The man in the gray suit. "Henderson, he didn't just log the waste. He called the foreman at 2:00 a.m. My mother stood on that construction site in her silk nightgown and watched the concrete swallow the car. She said, "Now you're a Vance again." Beatrice's face went white. The admission was out, on camera, to 300,000 witnesses. I felt a surge of triumph so sharp it almost made me dizzy. Did you hear that Beatrice, the golden boy, just tarnished your legacy for good? Suddenly, the elevator doors at the end of the hall chimed. The police swarmed the penthouse guns, drawn their tactical lights cutting through the luxury dimness. "Drop the weapon!" an officer shouted, aiming at Sterling, who was still clutching his bloodied head. "He doesn't have a weapon," I yelled, keeping my hands visible but my phone steady. "The evidence is in this folder, and the confession is on this phone." I watched as they tackled Sterling to the ground. I watched as they handcuffed Marcus Henderson, who had slumped into his chair, weeping silently. But when they approached Beatrice, she didn't move. She didn't struggle. She simply smoothed her skirt and looked at the lead officer. "My lawyers will be here in 10 minutes, she said, her voice ice cold. "And I suggest you handle me with more care than you do these criminals." The lead officer didn't blink. "Beatrice Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and illegal detention of a minor. You have the right to remain silent." As they led her past me, Beatrice stopped. She leaned in her breath, smelling of mint and expensive gin. "You think you've won, Lydia? You've destroyed a name that built this city? You'll be a pariah. You'll have nothing." I leaned back, a genuine predatory smile spreading across my face. I already had nothing, Beatrice. I was living with ghosts. Tonight, I finally stepped into the light. And by the way, I'm keeping the emeralds. I think I'll auction them off to build a memorial for Naomi Cross. Her eyes flared with rage, the first time I had ever seen her lose her composure. The officers pulled her away, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. But as the room cleared, my phone buzzed. A message from Arthur Cross. "Lydia, get out of there. Now." Henderson wasn't the only one on the payroll. The Vance shadow is longer than you think. I looked at the elevator. 2 officers I didn't recognize were standing there watching me. They weren't moving. They weren't helping with the arrests. They were just waiting. My blood went cold. The war wasn't over. It was just changing fronts. The 2 officers by the elevator didn't move like the others. They didn't have the chaotic energy of a precinct raid. They had the stillness of hunters. One of them tapped his earpiece, his eyes locked onto the folder clutched against my chest. "I need to leave. Now," I whispered to myself. I didn't head for the elevator. I turned and bolted back toward the service stairs near Henderson's kitchen. I could hear their heavy boots hitting the hardwood behind me. "Ma'am, stop! We need to secure that evidence!" one of them shouted. His voice wasn't authoritative. It was desperate. I ignored him, throwing myself through the heavy fire door and lunging down the concrete stairs. My lungs burned, and the adrenaline that had been my fuel for hours was beginning to flicker. I reached the 30th floor and slipped back into the hallway, ducking into a service elevator just as the doors groaned shut. I hit the button for the basement garage. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I opened the message thread with Arthur Cross. "Lydia, I'm in the garage. 2 cops are chasing me. They aren't the real ones. Arthur, I'm 2 blocks away in a gray van. Find the delivery exit on the north side. If you stay in that building, you're dead. They can't let that folder reach the precinct." The elevator doors opened to the cold, damp air of the underground parking lot. I stayed low, moving between the rows of black SUVs and silver sedans, the graveyard of the Chicago elite. "Lydia, we just want to talk." The voice echoed through the concrete cavern. They were in the garage. I saw the flash of a tactical light sweeping over the hoods of the cars. I crawled toward the north exit, my knees scraping against the grit. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my ankle. I screamed, kicking out with my free leg. My heel connected with something soft, a nose, a chin, and the grip loosened. I scrambled up, facing my attacker. It was the younger of the 2 men. He wasn't wearing a badge anymore. Give me the folder, Lydia. He hissed, blood dripping from his nose. Beatrice's friends in the city council won't let you walk out of here with those logs. You're an amateur playing in a pro league. The pro league just got broadcast to 500,000 people, I spat, backing away. You're protecting a sinking ship. The ship isn't sinking. It's just being cleaned, he said, reaching into his jacket for something that definitely wasn't handcuffs. Before he could pull it, a pair of headlights blinded us. A gray van roared around the corner, its engine screaming. The driver didn't slow down. He steered straight for the man. My attacker dove out of the way, rolling behind a concrete pillar. The van door slid open. Arthur Cross was behind the wheel, his face set in a grim mask. Get in now! I leapt into the van as the man started shooting. The glass of the side window shattered, spraying me with diamonds of safety glass, but I was already on the floor, the folder tucked under my body. Arthur floored it, the van fishtailing as we tore out of the delivery exit and into the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. Did you get it? Arthur asked, his voice tight. I got it, all of it, I gasped, sitting up and shaking glass from my hair. I looked out the back window. The black SU-5s were already giving chase, their sirens silent, but their intent clear. But we can't go to the police, not the city ones. I know, Arthur said, taking a hard right onto the freeway. We're going to the feds. I've been talking to an FBI contact for years. They've been building a RICO case against the Vance family's construction wing for a decade. They just needed the smoking gun, literally the car and the concrete. I looked at the folder. It felt heavy, like the weight of Naomi's soul and Cassidy's stolen years were pressed into the paper. Is Cassidy safe? I asked. She's at a safe house in Gary. She's scared Lydia, but for the first time, she's asking for her own clothes. She wants something. Blue. I smiled, a real one this time. Good. Tell her blue is a beautiful color. I looked at the rearview mirror. The headlights were still there, weaving through traffic, closing the gap. I reached for my phone. It was almost dead, but it had one last job to do. They think they can bury the truth again, I said, my voice hardening into a blade of pure ice. But I'm about to make sure this fire burns so hot the feds won't have a choice but to see it. I opened the live stream one last time. We're on the I-90, I said to the camera, my face streaked with dirt and blood, but my eyes shining. If anything happens to this van, look for the gray file. Look for the girl in the rain. The chase on the I-90 felt like a descent into the heart of a storm. The black SUVs were gaining their engines, roaring like predators closing in for the kill. Arthur gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. They're going to pit us, Lydia. Hold on, Arthur yelled as a black fender clipped the rear of the van, sending us into a terrifying fishtail. Keep driving, I screamed, braced against the metal interior. I checked the live stream. The viewer count had spiked to nearly 1 million. The world wasn't just watching. It was screaming for us. They can't kill us in front of 1 million people, Arthur. They aren't that powerful. You don't know the Vances, he gritted out. Suddenly, a wall of blue and red lights appeared on the horizon ahead of us. Not the local sirens, but the heavy authoritative strobes of federal SUVs. A roadblock had been formed across all 4 lanes. Is that them? I asked, my heart hammering. That's the FBI. Arthur breathed a sob of relief, breaking his voice. We made it. He slammed on the brakes, the van skidding to a halt just yards away from the federal line. I didn't wait. I grabbed the gray folder and stepped out into the rain. The black SUVs behind us screeched to a stop, but the men inside didn't move. They knew the game was over. Agents swarmed the area, their voices a muffled roar in the downpour. I stood there, soaked to the bone, holding the evidence above my head. A tall woman in a dark trench coat approached me, her badge glinting. I'm Special Agent Miller, she said, her voice calm and firm. Lydia Vance, you can lower the file. We've been watching the stream. We have it from here. I didn't hand it over immediately. I looked her in the eye, my gaze cold and unwavering. This isn't just a file. This is 12 years of a girl's life and another girl's grave. If this disappears into a bureaucratic hole, I will burn everything left of this city. Agent Miller nodded slowly. It won't disappear. The Vances are done. The concrete is being broken as we speak. 6 months later. The Chicago sun was bright, but it wasn't the harsh, blinding light of the penthouse. It was a soft, warm glow that filtered through the trees of a small park in Oak Brook. I sat on a bench, a cup of coffee in my hand. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wearing beige gray or muted tones. I was wearing a vibrant, defiant red coat. Beside me sat Cassidy. She looked different. Her skin had color, her eyes were sharp and curious, and the blue candy was a distant dark memory. She was wearing a simple blue dress, the color she had asked for. "They're taking the mall down, Lydia," Cassidy said, looking at a newspaper. The headline read, "Sterling Vance sentenced to 25 years. Beatrice Vance awaiting trial." "It's about time they cleared the ground," I replied. The FBI had found the car. The silver coupe, crushed and entombed in the foundation of Vance Plaza, had Naomi Cross's DNA on the bumper and Sterling's fingerprints on the steering wheel. Beatrice's signed checks to Henderson for waste disposal had provided the final nail in her coffin. "Do you think they'll ever forgive themselves?" Cassidy asked quietly. "I don't care if they do," I said, my voice hardening for a moment before softening as I looked at her. "What matters is that we forgave ourselves for surviving them. You're free, Cass. Truly free." Arthur Cross approached us from across the grass. He looked 10 years younger, though the sadness would always be in the corners of his eyes. He held a bouquet of emerald green carnations, not for jewelry, but for a memory. "The memorial is ready," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "They've turned the site into a garden, Naomi's garden." I stood up, smoothing my red coat. I had lost the Vance name, the penthouse, and the millions. My bank account was modest, and my reputation was that of a whistleblower, a term that made high society turn their backs on me. I had never felt more powerful. "Let's go," I said, taking Cassidy's hand on one side and Arthur's on the other. I was Lydia, just Lydia. I was a woman who had been treated like a puppet and ended up pulling the strings that brought an empire to its knees. I had been a pawn, then a prisoner, and finally a predator. As we walked away, the green light of the traffic signal changed to a steady, peaceful glow. For the first time, it didn't look like a crime scene. It just looked like the way forward. I looked back one last time at the Chicago skyline, the glass towers gleaming like a cage I had finally escaped. "The gray days are over," I whispered to the wind. "The world is finally in color." Never let anyone use their power or money to bury your voice or your truth. Stand your ground, stay tough, and remember that no amount of status is worth losing your freedom. Thanks for sticking around until the end of this story. If it hit home for you, don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment below to let me know what you think. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next gripping stories.